Otherwise, you are consciousness identified with form, the ego, trapped in form, the dream of form. And then consciousness disidentifies from form, wakes up and knows itself for the first time. This is a very short question, and hopefully the answer also will be short. Who becomes enlightened? So we could say the person does not become enlightened, but the person becomes transparent, one could say, and then light comes through, the light of consciousness comes through where the person was, perhaps still is for a while. It's not an attainment, it's a disappearance of the density of the mental emotional layers, that identification with which is the person. So the person becomes transparent, so to speak, all the structures. For example, it starts with the mind. The mind movement is interspersed with spaces, and that's how the light gets through, the light of consciousness. And so nobody becomes enlightened as such. Enlightenment, if you even want to use that word, is an awakening of consciousness. Was consciousness then asleep? Well, in some way, yes. Whenever there's identification with something, consciousness is dreaming the dream of form. And so, on the one hand, consciousness wants to continue the dream of form, and on the other hand, the dream of form means creating more forms. This is one movement in the universe, is to create more differentiation in the forms. The universe is obviously creating form. Look at the life even on one planet. Even if you just look at the life forms in the sea, millions of different life forms. So the universe actually loves that movement into form. And then there's something else that the universe loves, and that's the return to the source, to know itself. How do I know these things? Well, just through knowing this, the outer movement, the return movement. Us here, this gathering, anybody who is present with us here, is really part of the return movement to the source. The universe wants that as much as it wants to flow out into things and create. So we have the two movements. And it may not even be a question of either one or the other. It is possible for us to embody within both movements, so that we continue to create, but not blindly anymore, not egoically anymore, not compulsively anymore, which is there, for example, with the compulsive wanting more things, wanting more. That's part of the ego, and that's part of the universe's need to more things, more stuff. But we can be embody the return movement, and then when the awakening happens, the awakened consciousness can also create. Why would it do that? Not out of any need, but out of joy. A joyful creation, like an artist is joyful in it, not an egoic artist, but an artist who deeply enjoys the act of creativity. So we can consciously create form, but be aligned with the source. So through the human form, the source can create consciously rather than dreaming the dream of form, which is identification with forms. Conscious creation, a beautiful thing. So there may be some questions about that today, we'll see. I know that a very important, we live in this, at this time, on this planet, and perhaps everywhere. It could be that everything that happens here is a reflection of whatever happens in the universe. There's definitely a strong pull towards the return movement of the awakening of consciousness, how it awakens out of identification with form. How do you know that? Well, because it happens to you. Otherwise, you are consciousness identified with form, the ego, trapped in form, the dream of form. And then consciousness disidentifies from form, wakes up and knows itself for the first time. Nothing needs to change for you to know. You stay where you are, and then you suddenly know reality as yourself. And then you become a conscious co-creator. The universe moves through the human form and creates either a lot or little, doesn't matter, or nothing. It doesn't need to create. It's free not to create. Maybe you're a frequency holder who is not interested in creating. You can just be aligned with the source. And yet there too, you're still here in this dimension, something of the source will flow through you into this dimension. Don't attempt to understand all this intellectually, because it cannot be understood. I'm giving as much, and perhaps too much already, of what can be understood. The entire thing is far too vast for the human mind to understand. It doesn't need that. It's not necessary. You can be aligned, I've said it before, you can be aligned with the source, but you cannot understand the source. And yet you can be one with it, conscious oneness with the consciousness. You cannot understand consciousness. God. Amazing what they did. In the 19th century, there were these philosophers, they created a huge system, and every philosopher created his own system of thought to explain the entire universe. Intricate. And then they presented these as books that this is the entire universe explained. And then they had follow us. And now, kind of, it's not fashionable anymore to attempt to explain the entire universe in some kind of system. Hegel did it. Fichte, Schelling, Schopenhauer to some extent, he had deep insights into something beyond. But it's still a little limited because nobody can present us a mentally constructed system that explains the universe or God. You can explain neither the manifested and let alone the unmanifested. Many humans are going through the enlightening process. Enlightening has two, fortunately in the English language, light has two meanings, which is very nice. As you go through the enlightening or awakening process, you become lighter, not physically but psychologically. A lightness comes into your being, not the heaviness of the ego, the seriousness of the ego, you become lighter. But also the other meaning of light is the light shines through you. You become porous to the light. Consciousness moves through you. You can even, when I go to a public place or anywhere, occasionally I'm wrong, but usually I can point out the people in whom the process is happening and who are most likely to come up to me and talk to me and say, oh, we read your book. I can look at, they haven't seen me, I've seen them and said, out of these are the most likely to. I don't think that, I just see it. And then I put my sunglasses on.